Welcome to CS288W Windows Network Administration. I am your instructor, Robert McMillen, and today we're going to talk about our Module 7 presentation, which is all about IIS, and we're going to be using DNS to help us resolve names to IP addresses. So we're going to talk about what IIS is and how does it use ports. Since this is a Microsoft networking class, this is really all about how IIS uses networking and how we can configure the networking piece of this. We'll talk about bindings and host headers as well as virtual directories, all part of IIS. IIS networking. So what this lesson is not is how to make a web page. That's a completely different class. IT administrators need to know how to install and use IIS for applications that use it. I know in my career I've installed hundreds of servers with IIS on it, Internet Information Services. So customers or companies can create websites or use applications that use websites. All different kinds of applications like to use IIS for their application websites. So you definitely need to know how to get it going. Now, once it's going and running, you don't really need to know much more than the networking side of things, but you can pretty much turn everything over to the webmaster at that point. So you use IIS, like I said, for setting up special networking scenarios that we're going to learn in our lab. And IIS uses TCP port traffic, uses connection-oriented traffic, because you need to connect to a website. Well, it's got to be TCP. It can also be secured with certificates and permissions. So we're going to talk a little bit about security with IIS, not too much, but just enough to make sure you understand how it all works. So Internet Information Service, it started as a simple web server for HTML pages. If you go back to Windows NT 3.51 and T4, you could use IIS on those operating systems to make basic web pages, websites for companies or whoever. And over the years, it's grown to do much more. So pretty much you had to choose between Apache on Linux or IIS on Windows. And now Windows does everything that Apache does and even some additional things. So it's becoming a much more attractive way of setting up a website or an application website. You also can use IIS to set up an FTP server, file transfer protocol. So you use an FTP server to transfer large files. Like if you were going to transfer a file that was 50 megabytes, it's just a little bit too big to send over an email server. Most email servers don't allow that. And if you had something in the gigabytes, it makes it even harder. So a lot of people are using services like Box and Dropbox, but they're just fancy FTP servers. You can actually do that for free right in your Windows Server 2012. It can also serve up applications. There's all different kinds of application pools that are built into this, as well as the ability to add third-party pools where you can take other applications written by other companies and add them into IIS. You can also use it as an online shopping cart. So if you want to be able to have people buy things securely from your website, well, you can do that right in IIS. So there's several types of websites we're going to learn in this lesson. The intranet website, the extranet website, and the intranet website. Those are all three distinct types of websites that you can create in IIS. So the internet website is the traditional website used by people when they connect to your website, say your company website, and they're on the outside of your company. So they may be people wanting to place an order or just learn more about your company. That is an internet website. It can be as simple as using the HTML code that we used back in the 90s, or it could also use PHP, ASP, basically interactive type of websites and websites that can connect to a database on the back end. So they can hold things like usernames and passwords and confidential information just tied to your account, like a lot of companies do. An extranet website is a lot different than just a basic internet website. So an extranet website is similar as far as it's a website that people access from the outside. However, it's more used by one company placing orders from another company. So if you have a B2B type of a business, an extranet website is the type of website you would normally set up. It could be a way for clients to access information about themselves, such as a healthcare site. That could be an extranet site. It's almost always tied to a back-end database where there's tons of information that can be securely transferred. So it sort of starts out as an intranet website, but then it takes another turn where you add all this additional information. It typically also uses public certificates to create a secure, compliant type of site where you can securely log in and verifies that you are logging into the site that you think you're logging into to keep you from getting hacked. An intranet website goes another direction. So again, it starts out as an intranet website, but then it's really used by people inside your own organization. It's used internally. You make the site for your own people in-house. So if it's a company website, for instance, it can contain company information, photos, events, announcements, basically things that anybody can get to if they're on the inside of the network. It's typically not a secure site because it's only accessible if you're plugged in inside the network. You can make it secure if you decide to post things about employees that employees can access securely using a certificate. That's certainly an option if you want to do that. You definitely don't want to have that without the certificate, without the encryption. Otherwise, you could be breaking several laws. So you, for instance, pay stubs, health insurance, other private information, all that kind of stuff can be used on an intranet if you want. But it's typically not used that way. Most intranet websites are used more for, it's sort of a social gathering place to make announcements and show pictures and things like that. You can usually only get to it, like I said, when you're inside the network, or you could be outside the network, but you're using VPN because you're a company employee. So how does IIS use ports? Well, TCP over IP is used for the connectivity to all types of sites. TCP is connection oriented. So remember, you've got to have that three-way handshake in order to connect to a website. You can change the port number, to hide what port it's listening on, but by default, it's going to listen on port 80. It can listen on any one of 65,535 TCP ports if you decide to do that. HTTPS is a little different than HTTP, which listens on port 80. So HTTPS listens on port 443. And again, that's the default site for secure connections using a certificate. However, you can change that to another port as well. Bindings, this is what where the website is bound to a particular port. So we just talked about which port you want to put the website on or have it listen on. Well, that's called a binding. So there's a link in IIS for the bindings on every single website in the upper right side of IIS, and I'll show you that in a minute. So that's where you can change the port that the website listens on for both types of traffic, secure and unsecure. This is where you can also bind the certificate to a port for secure traffic, and you can also add host headers to a site. Host headers is a really cool invention for websites, because before host headers, you were really stuck with only one website per IP address that could listen on port 80. So it required that you buy or rent multiple IP addresses from your ISP if you hosted more than one website, because only one website at a time could listen on port 80. Host headers divide up port 80 traffic by name. So let's say, for instance, you have a website that's called A.com and you have a second website that's called B.com. Well, if you only have one IP address, you have to choose. Are you going to host A.com or B.com on port 80? Now, the other website, you could change port numbers, but then most people won't know how to get to it. Most people don't think of putting in a port number when they connect to a website. They just default to port 80. So what host headers does is that it allows you to list in website A, say, hey, if anything comes in from the internet asking for A.com, then let it go to this website. And if anything is asking for B.com, go to that website. And so that way it allows you to listen on port 80 for two separate websites using a single IP address. So that's a great invention. IIS will redirect the traffic based on the name the user puts in to their browser. Virtual directories. This is pretty cool. This allows multiple sub-websites using the same host header name. So it appends the name, just as this example is. So if you have www.a.com, instead of creating a whole new website, you can just create a virtual directory. And that virtual directory can be anywhere you want. It doesn't have to be in the subdirectory of a.com, because it's a virtual directory, not a physical directory. So you could have a.com/company could be one website, and a.com/internet could be, or intranet could be a completely different website. So the last two domain names are the regular host headers with an appended subfolder. And as I said, they could be in any folder you want. It can even be on a different server if you want. So we talked a little bit about IIS, what it is, how it uses ports, bindings, host headers, and virtual directories. So now let's go over to our lab, and we will go through all the different instructions that we need to get going. To start out with, go ahead and boot up DC01 and Router01. We'll need client a little bit later. So now we are in our Router01, and we have Server Manager open. So we're going to go ahead and add the IIS role. So let's go ahead and click Add Roles and Features. Of course, if you click it before this little thing stops spinning at the top, then you'll get an error message. So sometimes you have to wait a minute. Looks like we're good to go. All right, so click Next, Next. And here what we want is Web Server IIS, and click on Web Server. And if it's not already checked, go ahead and check the management tools as well. Just the root is fine. Next, we're going to leave the features as they are and install. And this could take a few minutes, so just be prepared for that. All right, installation was successful. Let's go ahead and click Close. And now when we go to Tools, we should see Internet Information Services, which we do. So we maximize that and go ahead and expand. This message will pop up. Just click Do Not Show This Again and choose No. It's just an annoying little commercial. I don't need it. So take a look around a little bit. We have our default website. We see several different things such as default document, directory browsing, some different things like that. SSL for adding certificates. There's bindings, all these different things that we're going to use in here, and just get familiar with it by clicking on some of these things. See what they say. Like click on default document, for instance. See the default document is default.htm. Hit the back arrow if you want, and you could click on, say, HTTP response headers. There's nothing in there. Okay, great. So just get used to it a little bit, and then we'll move on to our lab and start configuring some things. So let's take a look at where the default website is. All we have to do is go over to Basic Settings, and it tells us it's in our system drive, which is our C drive, inet pub www root. So let's go ahead and go to Windows Explorer and go to our C drive and inet pub and www root. And here's a couple of default documents that are in there already. So let's go ahead and create a text file. It's the simplest of all files. It doesn't have to be that, but that's just what we're going to do. And we're going to call it companyweb.txt. All right. Let's just make sure under View that we check the box for file name extensions, because if you don't, then you see companyweb.txt.txt, which will screw everything up. So let's just go ahead and get rid of that second .text. Good. All right, so now we're going to put in welcome to Widgets LLC. So let's go ahead and do that. Welcome to Widgets LLC. And we will just make that a bigger font to make it easier to see when we go to our web page. You don't have to, it just makes it a little bit easier. And we'll go, say, 36. And we'll bring it down a little bit. And we'll tab over. Make it sort of in the middle. That's good. All right, let's go ahead and save that. Close it. And we'll see that listed there. Make sure it's spelled right. And then minimize. Now we're going to go over to our default document, double click on it, and we're going to change it. So we're going to click Add Company Web.txt. Make sure it's all lowercase. And you see it makes it at the top of the list. If it's not at the top of the list, then it won't be the default page. It'll try to go to these other pages first, so we don't want that. All right, so now we're going to go switch to our DC01, and we're going to do some DNS work. So this is a networking class. DNS is a big part of it. So let's go ahead and expand our forward lookup. And you're going to want to create your widgetllc.com if it's not already there. If it is already there, you're good to go. So just to refresh you, you go to New Zone, Next. You can leave it as the primary. Next to all DNS servers, Next. And you type in widgetllc.com and Next and Finish. And you'll end up with widgetllc.com. So we're going to create a new A record or host record. There it is, host. And we're going to call it www. So you see it appends it to widgetllc.com. And we'll give it the IP address of our router 01. Don't worry about checking the other things. Okay, very good. So www.widgetllc.com, there we are. So let's go ahead and do an ipconfig /flush DNS. Get rid of all that cached information. Ping www.widgetllc.com. And there it is. The 192.168.0.1. That's perfect. So let's go back to our router 01 and we'll do the same exact thing. And we'll ping. Beautiful. Okay, we're good to go on that. So now it's time to go to our client computer and work on that one for a second so we can connect to our website. All right, we're in our Windows 8 computer. Right click on command prompt and choose run as administrator. Do an ipconfig /flush DNS. Now ping. There we go. All right, had a little typo in the first one. So we are pinging the correct IP address. So now we're going to go into Internet Explorer and see if we can get the IP address, see if the website will come up for us. So let's go ahead and type that in, www.widgetllc.com. And there it is. Welcome to Widgets LLC. Unfortunately, it didn't retain our large font, but that's okay. I still got the idea. So now we can move on to our next project. So let's switch back to router 01. There we go. Come on. There we go. And let's go to the root of the C drive. These things do time out fairly quickly if you don't change the settings. So we're going to go to the root of the C drive, and we're going to create a folder for our virtual directory. And as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't have to be a physical subdirectory of the one that the parent is in. You can create it in a whole other place. Let's go to, here we are. Okay, we're in the root of the C directory, and there we go. And we're going to create a folder called intranet. Make sure you don't do internet. And we're going to create another file, new text file, and call it intranet.txt. And again, make sure that you're under view, you have file name extensions, otherwise you're going to type it wrong and have .text and not even realize it. All right, so inside there, we're going to write welcome widget LLC staff. All right. And we'll just go ahead and save that. There we go. So we're back in our default website, and we'll just double check our bindings here. So we're bound to port 80, so that's good. So now we're going to, there we go. So now we right click on our default website and we choose add virtual directory. And you need to have an alias in there, and our alias we will call intranet, and all lowercase. And we'll locate our intranet folder. There it is. Click OK, and now we have a what looks to be a subfolder, but it's really a virtual directory underneath our default website. Now we have a whole new set of bindings over here, basic settings, things like that. So let's see, we got exactly what we want. That's great. Now we go to our default document. All right, we gotta make sure we're in the right place there. There we go. And we're going to click add and call it intranet.txt, just like we called our file. And make sure again it's at the top, which it is. So let's go to our client computer. Open back up the Internet Explorer web browser. If you want to, you can put any other web browser in there if you like Chrome better or Firefox or whatever, it doesn't matter to me. And in our web browser, we'll just go ahead and put in www.widgetllc.com/intranet, which is our virtual directory. Hit enter. Boom. Welcome, Widget LLC staff. So we've now created an internet site. We've created an intranet site using a virtual directory, although you can, if you want, make a whole new website for that. And so now we're going to create an extranet site. Just a real basic one, not an official one. We're not going to be using any public certificates, but it just shows you how it's going to work, and we're going to do it on a completely different port. So let's go back to our router, open up Windows Explorer, go back to the root of the C drive again, and this time we're going to create a new folder and call it orders. Again, all lowercase, keep everything lowercase, just keep anything goofy from happening. And new text file, orders. Now we're going to open that up and we're going to say, welcome customers. And we'll go ahead and close that. And we're going to go over to our server, not the default website, because we're going to create a whole new website. We're going to say add website. So you got a few things we have to fill out here. So this time we're going to call our site, again, lowercase, we'll call it orders. We'll choose our physical path, which we just created. Orders. Very good. We'll leave it as HTTP, but we're going to change the port to 81. And our site name is going to be orders.widgetllc.com. All right, click OK to that. And we'll go over to our default document. And we need to call it orders.txt. And again, make sure it's at the top, which it is. Let's swing back to DC01 for a second. And under widgetllc.com, that thing always times out on you. You got to watch that. Let's right-click in widgetllc.com, create another new host record, and this time call it orders. Same IP address. There we go. Okay, so let's flush the DNS, and let's change it to orders just to make sure it works. And it does. Let's go to our Windows 8 computer. Oh, we got to go in as admin. So right click, choose run as administrator. and do ipconfig/flush DNS. Now ping orders.widgetllc.com. All right, we're getting the right thing. That's great. Let's open up Internet Explorer, and we're going to open a slightly different web page this time. So this time we're going to put in orders.widgetllc.com, but we're going to put in a :81 because remember we're listening on port 81. We're not listening on port 80 like we were with the other websites. So let's go ahead and hit enter, and boom, welcome customers. So that's how you change the port from the default 80 to 81. So if I just took that out altogether, let's see what would happen. And it says welcome to Widget LLC. See, it defaulted back to our intranet site, which is the widgetllc.com. Even though it says orders, because it's listening on port 80 there, it defaulted to the other website. As soon as I change it to port 81, then we get the right one. Welcome customers. So I hope that was eye-opening for you. You know how to create websites on different ports. You know how to create virtual directory websites, secondary websites, intranet, internet, extranet, all just in this one little lab. So it's not too bad for 25 minutes. So don't forget your deliverables, doing all your screenshots at the right time, answering some of these questions. And of course, at the end, we've got our reflection, just as we usually do. So let's go ahead and scroll down to that. And what did you learn? Did you have any problems? How did you resolve them? And then for our knowledge adaptation, you're going to be, you want to secure an intranet website from people who may be inside our land visiting. How would you add security so only Active Directory domain users would have access to the site? So just to give you a hint, when you go into Router 01, one of your options, if you right-click on the site, is to edit the permissions. So that sort of gives you an idea on where you need to start. So give me 1 to 2 paragraphs on that. So that concludes our Module 7 lecture and lab demo.